of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Chistero. Chapter 33. All Might. Edging the intruder towards the door, his blade glinting, Shouta rolled his eyes when the banging continued. He remembered his high school food tech teacher extolling the virtues of having professional top-of-the-range knives. She'd agreed that the expense was steep, but the rewards would greatly outweigh the cost, and she'd been right, hadn't she? After being able to, and unexpectedly, save so much yen, he really didn't want to spend any money replacing what was a perfectly good door. Damn it. Move. Now, he grunted, watching as the other side turned around and shoved the barrier open before walking through it to the service bar. The cafe owner then had to endure the inevitable chaos of, "Sure, what's going on? Are you okay?" Dobby and Dom were bolting down the stairs, their pajama-covered forms tense and eyes wild, considering they were in soft matching oversized jersey t-shirts and shorts, with in dove grey with cats and food items dotted all over them in different colors. And barefoot, they looked incredibly menacing. What? Oh God, oh no! He's going to kill me! Help me! Mr. Compress flailing and rushing behind him, clearly more terrified by who was outside than the knife he'd very nearly cut him with. As he joined him in his main workspace, his taller frame curled around the back of him to hesitantly look over his shoulder and... "Knock on my door, and there'll be no muffins for you, mister. None. You hear me?" All Might looming ominously outside his cafe, plumes of steam jutting from his nostrils as he crowded the doorway, whilst the neon blue of his supernatural eyes blazed like will-o'-the-wisps in the dark. God, what was his life right now? "You son of a bitch!" Dobby snarled, his venomous tone dragging his attention back towards the kitchen, where the pair glowered intimidatingly, their glare shifting from the hands gripping his shoulders to the former performer himself. "Get your filthy hands off of him before you lose them altogether!" Sighing as the villain, still clutching onto him like a life raft, trembling and ducking even further behind him. He'd not used his quirk, though, or tried to take him hostage. Let out something akin to a sob whilst the teen stood in the entryway, his lodger's hair aflame and his partner's hands now gloveless. Shouta rolled his eyes, sucked in a breath, and shook his head. "Everybody calm down," he said, his sentoku pointed at All Might. "You, back up and away from the door. Go on," he shouted with a gesture before looking over his shoulder at the brunette, who was actually quivering. "It's not going to hurt you," he stated, his gaze then slanting to his young friends. "No one is going to hurt anybody, all right?" "But sure, he's..." "I understand your feelings." He smiled at his unofficial ward. "And I thank you for wanting to defend me. You honestly have no idea what that means to me," he furthered warmly. "But neither of you is going to jail for murder, not on my watch," he stated firmly, his tone brokering the argument. "Tch, you serve less time for assault," Dobby growled, those turquoise eyes alight with actual heat, as he scowled furiously at the genuinely terrified Mr. Compress.
"Witness bodily harm gets a pretty low sentence these days, too,"
Tom Rat added ominously, a nasty smirk tugging his lips.
"You'd be pretty useless without your hands now, wouldn't you?"
"What? No, please! Please, no!" the former performer begged. "I would change the mind, I swear!" Jumping on a laugh, because this was also irrationally ridiculous. The eatery owner opened the smart till's drawer, placed the knife into it, closed it, and walked over to the alarm panel with everyone watching his movements. The brunette clamped onto him like a living, breathing turtle shell. God, why did he have to put up with such things? Then the sensors deactivated, he turned on the lights, grabbed Atsukiro by his right wrist, not too harshly, and pulled him past the security gate and into the cafe proper before gesturing for him to approach the second booth. He wasn't sure that his oldest ward would take kindly to his spot being taken, his hand raising when the other went to talk. "Sit," he ordered, watching as the older man quivered, but went and sat without complaint, his features uneasy. Shouta then walked to the cafe door, opened it, and stood before a still bristling symbol of peace. Wow, there were a lot of pulsing veins writhing across those astonishing muscles. Damn, Did the pro run here? Take it easy, big guy. He soothed, his hands raised placatingly when he realized just how strong he was. No one needs Texas smashing, all right? Grinning fiercely, the blonde allowed a strained nod to bend that impressive neck. I'm very glad that everything is okay. He managed to get out in a semi-friendly tone. Damn, the big lug had been worried, hadn't he? Nodding, he walked away and beckoned him inside whilst pulling out his phone, the teens regarding him as though he'd grown an extra head. Sir Nida, are you still there? Yes, came the response on loudspeaker, the sound of traffic filtering behind him. My ETA is 5 minutes. I'll start up the coffee machine. He replied. See you soon. He finished before taking in the stress-laden situation that was mounting all around him. Atsukiro was sat on the plush bench, literally sweating bullets. Dabi was now flameless, but still fuming, and Tomer was pouting, his quirk-restricting gloves sliding back on. All Might was still in the doorway, his shadowed face locked onto the brunette with an intensity that could probably wither a steel girder. Wonderful! Okay, he stated, his legs walking towards the boys, who he pulled into a gentle squeeze. He'd wanted to make a teasing remark about how cute they looked in their nightwear, but decided against it. He could coo over them and make a fuss later. As the tension built from their shoulders. Thank you for looking out for me, he whispered to them before pulling away. We've got a busy day tomorrow, so why don't you head upstairs and put on one of those movies you said I had to watch? He offered. I'll bring us up some hot chocolate when we're done, okay? Grunting, their turquoise and crimson gazes zeroing in on the villain who'd disturbed the night they'd had planned. With Itoshi being away for the night, they'd planned on watching something a little more exciting than the U-rated anime that their youngest family member enjoyed so much. The teens muttered death threats, but walked away. Such good kids. Then, knowing that they were settled, he returned to the coffee machine, switched it on, and started it up. What in the world are you doing all the way on this side of town? He called conversationally, his hands grabbing 4 mugs and going through how each of the men preferred their caffeine. Izuku and Itoshi were really impressed with that special of yours tonight, too. So expect them to ask you all about it when you see them next. He added as though this was a completely normal setup at a normal time of day. When he didn't get an answer, he turned to regard the man. He seemed unable to move. Pouring 3 of the beverages out, he carefully walked past him, put a mug in front of Sako, who whispered to Hermit, Are you sure he isn't coming to kill me because he looks like he's struggling not to please I don't want to die? Snorted at him, and then made his approach to the taller hero. When the other still looked pensive, he gently reached out to place his hand, at least 2 times smaller than the other's holy crap, on the impressive bulk of the powerhouse's right arm. You want to come in properly and sit at your usual table. You're not offended about what I said earlier, right? I was only joking about the muffins, you know. He tried to chuckle. Shouta couldn't The other breathed out. I had thought. Hey, it's all right. He smiled. Now, come on. Let's get you settled, and I'll bring you a drink and something different I've been working on that I wanted you to try again. He grinned. Not even Dabi's tried this recipe yet, and although I was going to save it for the cat cafe opening next week, well, I may as well get your opinion while you're here, hadn't I? Grunting, he submitted to his bowl, the stiffness of his limbs easing whilst they moved towards one of the table setups he usually chose to sit in when he visited or waited for an order to be boxed up. It also happened to be a good 10 feet away from a very wary Mr. Compress. He probably shouldn't leave them alone together, should he? When was... Beep, beep. Yeah, right on time. He breathed, his own relief flooding him as he looked to the sedan as it pulled up, Bubble Girl and Centimeter already jumping from the back passenger seats to rush forward, their bodies slowing at his placating gesture. Welcome to the Norodeko Cafe, he said, his body walking back towards the service bar. What could I get you? Little more than 20 minutes later saw a much calmer scene in his humble little eatery. It had just gone 22:22. Dabi and Tomo were spamming his phone with questions and gifts that involved violence in varying degrees. He tried not to laugh when one particular animation showed a caricature of All Might actually smashing another avatar to bits. That kind of went against the other sunny pleasant image, didn't it? However, there was no denying the fierce intensity he'd just witnessed. It was hard to remember sometimes, given his broad smiles and jolly demeanor, that their country's symbol of peace could literally demolish a skyscraper in one well-placed punch. He was also a person. A person who seemed to be wrestling with some unseen enemy as he sat there, still coiled like a spring, ready to bound around and hurt something. Maybe even himself.
Okay, Zako-san. I am satisfied that you meet the majority of my initiative's criteria.
He heard Sir Night-Eye say, his yellow-suited form set across from the brunette, who looked just about ready to buzz out. Nothing less than he deserved.
You will hand over your stolen assets and surrender yourself to my custody, yes?
Watching the scene from where he was stood behind the service bar, Shouta took in the pro's empty plate. He didn't really care for sweets. However, he'd accepted the sandwich he'd whipped up for him with a fond, indulgent smile, and mug before turning to All Might as he sat with the two sidekicks. Centipeter, who on the flip side seemed to go for anything sugary, and Bubble Girl had both enjoyed their hot chocolates and demolished the plate of cookies he'd set between them. He'd baked more in the morning for Uraraka-san and his compatriot. Then his cautious gaze landed on the sun-kissed pro who was finally settling down. The generous slice Black Forest gâteau he'd made, which, outside of the devil's food cake, was the most decadent thing he'd ever tried. However, there'd been a fantastic sale on sun-ripened black cherries, and he'd been unable to resist making one, since it seemed like a sin to boil all the fruit up just for syrup. Was untouched. I understand, the brunette nodded. And thank you, he said with an earnest bow. I have been misguided and overzealous in my selfish ambitions, he admitted, his hand reaching for the pen that the stern-faced pro had offered him. I swear to you that I'll do my best, he added before, those doe eyes, the contact lenses having been removed, slipping over to him, his lips pulling into a small smile. It seems that I have found a new muse to inspire me, he grinned. Rolling his eyes, he heard his huff before he realized he'd released it. Don't go laying anything like that on me, thank you, he told him bluntly. If you do this for yourself and for the next generation that'll come after you, he stated. You're taking on a big responsibility, so make sure that you commit to it for your own reasons. He furthered, his arms crossing. But if you do manage to pull this off, then I suppose you can return her as a customer. He shrugged. Well, so long as my boys forgive you first. When he returned to the cafe after tidying away the dishes, he wasn't too surprised to see that the sidekicks had been the ones to take Atsukira away to the new life he would hopefully carve out for himself in a separate police car, whilst both now sitting at the table, All Might and Sir Night-Eye quietly talked. It was 22:30. Sure, it wasn't late by anyone's standards. He didn't usually fall asleep before midnight anyway. A life keeping watch over 4 nightmare prom boys would do that to you. But he was a little concerned that he may have overstepped his boundaries by calling these men in the first place. He'd been able to handle Zago by himself, hadn't he? Feeling more than a little guilty, the gâteau still resting on the table, he quietly walked around to them. I'm sorry, he began. I should have called the police in the first instance, he admitted with a little nod. It was... Closing his mouth, Shouta allowed the other to fold around him after he'd stood, those massive arms, strong enough to crush a bus without breaking a sweat, encircling him and holding him close. Holding him like he was something that the other could have lost. Slowly he returned the gesture. Now, or at least he tried to. His arms would need to be at least 3 feet longer to wrap around the big lug, wouldn't they? I am so glad that you're all right, the blonde told him before, with a jerky, abortive motion, he pulled away a little shamefaced. Sorry, he said it. That was injustice of me. It's fine, he returned, their eyes locking. Hugs seemed to be the order of the day, as of late. He shrugged. And you're wrong to think that I'd mind, he told him with a smile. Something tells me that you could do with a lot more of them. He added, his expression softening. Carrying the weight of our safety on your shoulders has gotta be really fucking tough, he acknowledged. So I want you to know that you are always welcome here. Not as a symbol of peace, but as someone who just needs a place to be you, alright? Watching as the man bulked, Sir Night-Eye similarly standing, his usually stern countenance wavering, The slender hero offered him a deep bow.
"Thank you, Aizawa-san," he said in his best friend's stead. You can't understand what that means," he offered.
"Well, that goes for you as well, sir."
He grinned.
If the two of you want a real taste of normality, our local pros and I will be painting, tidying, and getting everything ready for the cats tomorrow afternoon, if you'd like to join us.
Waving the pair off, they'd been oddly delighted by the thought of getting covered in paint. How irrational. Shouta rubbed his tense shoulders, yawned, and returned to his kitchen.
Please don't let anything else weird happen tonight.
He internally muttered the hot chocolate he'd offered to his boys in Anne. He'd finally made it up the stairs. To see his young friends snoozing on the sofa, a movie playing across the wide screen at a low volume as Toma rested across Dabi's chest amidst his parted legs. The flame quirk user's arms loosely wrapped over his partner's back, his head tilted back on the old couch's plush armrest. Adorable. Snickering to himself, he put the drinks on the coffee table. They'd happily drink them cold if they woke up, wouldn't they? Quietly checking they were comfortable, dimmed the AC and switched off the movie before padding to his room, his phone in hand. Maybe he should have talked to the older boys about inviting the men who'd just left over tomorrow. Nah, it'll be okay. Neither of them would mind too much that the heroes were coming by, he was sure. They'd already agreed that the five of them, Inko had allowed Izuku joining their merry band, would go out in the morning when the loud dusty work would take place, and then that afternoon he'd let them paint and decorate the 3 bedrooms. It was only fair that his boys get to style their living spaces, wasn't it? The excited look on Atoji's face, and Dabi ordering spray paint for motif work, his smile genuinely thrilled, but enough to make him want to buy several apartments for them to play with. How illogical. However, he couldn't deny that he was looking forward to seeing what the 3 would do. Izuku, the sensible, easily pleased young man that he was, had offered to supervise their efforts, and he, in turn, would oversee the adults in the cat area. It was a little worrying that he felt the older people would need overseeing as opposed to the younger, wasn't it? Bzz, 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 bzz. Blinking, his own bedroom door quietly closing behind him, Shouta approached his futon with its plain blue sheets in its austere four-walled setting, his laptop, phone charger, and lamp the only furnishings, as there was a small chest of drawers within the built-in sliding door wardrobe. Sat on it with a sigh. "Oh my,
this cake is... I don't have words!"
So the big log had finally calmed down enough to eat it, huh? Good. Aizawa Shouta.
You can have the rest of it tomorrow, if you like. Cream doesn't do well in this weather, even in the chiller.
He wrote back before his smile dimming.
How are you feeling?
All right. Silence. Quirking a brow, he hummed, stripped off his t-shirt, opened the wardrobe, and shoved it into his laundry basket. It was probably too personal a question. He really didn't understand how interactions between people his own age and slightly older people worked. Dealing with younger people and much older people was what he'd always been used to, after all. His jeans and lightweight socks followed before his eyes assessing the handful of outfits he had. He'd put his oldest, most tattered t-shirt and shorts to one side for tomorrow's decorating session, before grabbing a pair of PJ pants from the top drawer of his chest and slipping them on. That way he could sleep on top of the covers and still be decently dressed if Dabi or Tomura had a nightmare and needed soothing. All might.
How do you do that?
Tilting his head confusedly. Was that question meant for him? Shouta Aizawa Shouta.
Do what?
All might.
Completely disarm me with simple questions that are genuinely meant.
Regarding the message quizzically, the cafe owner felt at a loss. Surely the man, world famous, adored by millions, was constantly being asked such things. Was being taken care of. It'd be illogical to think otherwise, right? Illogical. Awful. Aizawa Shouta.
Are you deflecting the question?
He pushed.
I have no interest in any gossip, I assure you. I am concerned about you, though.
He admitted, because that was the truth. He'd never been held like that before. It made him wonder. It made him worry. Just how many people had All Might lost? How many ghosts of loved ones haunted those broad, impassable shoulders? Why was no one checking up on him and his mental well-being? That was probably wrong of him to assume, though. He saw how Sir Night-Eye looked at his friend. Maybe more. He wouldn't want to speculate how protective he was. Now that he stopped and really thought about it, what kind of devastation were those smiles, laughs, and poses hiding? And what could he do other than throw cake at the problem? All Might.
I'm unsure of how to answer that.
Fuck, that wasn't good, was it? Hell, in here, he thought of himself as emotionally constipated. Aizawa Shouta.
It's got to be hard for you.
He conceded.
I bet you rarely get a chance to be yourself.
He added, because, well, that's what happened to celebrities, wasn't it? You build up a brand, an image, a style, and then poof, out with a person, in with what people wanted you to be. God, no thanks. Aizawa Shouta.
For what it's worth, I see you.
He told him, rightly or wrongly.
There's no idea who you truly are when you gush over my study group, coo at the cafes, cat photos, or eat muffins.
He continued, his smile broadening.
Underneath all those action figures, flashy posters, legends, tactical intellect, and muscles, you're just a big sappy dope, aren't you?
All Might, said the photo. Blinking, a laugh snort flowing out of him despite himself. Shouta shook his head ruefully at the hammy over the shocked face. All Might's left hand was even pressed dramatically to his forehead, lips pouting. That was set back to him with a clearly guffawing Sir Night-Eye holding his sides in the background. How illogically cute.